My name's Nicole Bromley, and I'm sharing my story today about sexual abuse. My stepfather came in my life when I was just a toddler. My first memory was about 4 years old. I remember him coming into my bedroom when I was asleep. And I almost had tricked myself into thinking it was a bad dream that I had, but now I know it wasn't. We always played a lot of games as a family, but there were times when he wanted to just play a card game with me. And whoever won the card game got to tickle the other person. And so that's kind of where it started, where I started questioning myself. Like, am I crazy? Like, did he mean to touch me there? All of these little things would be happening in the touching, and I would be uncomfortable. And sometimes I would say, stop that, or I would jump away, and he would just laugh it off like I was being crazy or I was overreacting. And so it made me think I was overreacting, and of course he didn't mean to do that, but it kept happening more and more, and then eventually it led to some of the worst family vacations of my life. I remember my mom was laying on the beach and he asked me to come swim with him. And so I did, because again, it wasn't always bad. And I remember him touching me under my bathing suit in the water. And I wanted to tell my mom so bad all of these times. But in the back of my mind of what he always said to me, she'll never believe you. You'll ruin our family. It just didn't seem really worth it. But that's sort of how it started. It started small. I remember feeling so much like it was my fault. As a child, I was like holding our whole family together, holding our public persona, really, the way that people viewed us. Because it was like, I was a poster child of our community, really. I was a straight A student. I was the team captain of every sport I played. I was student council president. It was all of this pressure to hold it all together. And so I felt so tormented inside as to what to do, because it seemed like I wanted to let it out so bad, but I was so afraid of what would happen if I did. I didn't know who to believe. What would happen if somebody did believe me? I just felt confused, afraid, and silenced. When I was 14 years old, we went on this dream vacation to the Bahamas. Being at the resort, my stepdad needed to get some things out of our van that was in the parking lot. He asked me if I would help him. And I remember getting on the elevator and going down and just feeling like something wasn't right. So we get out to the van and he told me to hop in the back seat and look for the cooler. And then he hopped in the back seat too. And he said, sit up straight and don't move around. And it happened again with all the touching. And I remember feeling so scared. I was always so scared. It was like I would just freeze. And it was like I couldn't move. It was almost like I was watching it happening outside of my body. I remember him saying to me, "You're really special." And he said, if I loved him, I would let him. And that was a line that really has haunted me for most of my life. These things that happen when you're so young really do impact you for a lifetime. Going up to the hotel and my stepdad telling me to act like nothing happened in front of my mom. So I remember getting back from that vacation and just feeling so badly I wanted to tell my mom. But I always thought my mom had a great marriage, a great relationship. She seemed happy. My mom and I were in the car. And then all of a sudden she started sharing with me about how she felt like my stepdad had been acting strange, and especially on that vacation. And she turned to me and she said, "Has he done anything strange around you?" I remember thinking to myself, if I'm gonna ever tell my mom, this is the time. It felt like time had stopped, and I was sitting here like risk versus reward, just weighing it all out, and like, I know if I tell, this could change everything. And all of a sudden I just told her, I just hinted to the fact that yeah, he's been acting weird around me. And she looked at me, she said, "Has he ever touched you?" And it was at that moment that I shook my head yes. And she slammed on the brakes and she pulled the car over the side of the road. And that was the first time I knew it was wrong. I will say that I feel very fortunate because my mom believed me. She said, "I don't know what we're going to do, but I'll figure it out." And that brought a lot of relief. But at the same time, it was absolutely terrifying. We still live with this man and we had to go home to him. My mom said, "We're going home as if nothing happened. When he leaves for work on Monday, we're leaving and reporting this." And that's what we did. all of the lies that he told me that would happen if I told my mom, especially, I realized were a lie, because she was now standing by me. She believed me. She was willing to go to bat for me. And so Monday we left. We reported the abuse. They interviewed me, and then they interviewed him. He had denied everything, and we were scheduled to go to court in a month. The detective advised us to leave town because he was not only denying it, he seemed like he could do something drastic. My stepfather was really controlling. Every minute of my mom's day was always accounted for. He always had to know where she was going, when she would be back. And it was more controlling, I think, than we had realized at the time. He was trying to find us. We got a restraining order so that he couldn't hurt us, because we really believed that he was going to find us and he was going to kill us. So we ended up going to different friends and families, every night going somewhere different, trying to hide from him, and he was trying to find us. But I was really tired of being like cooped up in all these houses. You know, we were just hiding for days. It had been like 5 days by now that we were still hiding, waiting for this court date, which was still almost a month out. So I remember walking on the street, my mom and my grandma with me, and I looked up and I saw his big blue van driving towards us on the street. So I yelled at them to run because it was him. We ran for the library, which was just around the corner, and we stayed there for a while, and he didn't find us. I felt so grateful, because that was the first time we had seen him since my mom reported it, since we'd left our home. A couple days later, we went and stayed with some family friends, and the father took his children and me to a store. We went shopping for a little bit while my mom stayed back with the other mom. And as I came back with the father and the other children, I saw a police car leaving the driveway. When I walked in the door, I saw my mom sitting at the dining room table. She was really quiet and just like didn't even look up, didn't acknowledge me coming in. I said, "What's wrong, Mom? Why were the police here?" She said, "Nicole, he shot himself." I said, "He's dead?" She said, "Yeah." I remember running around that house just screaming, "I hate him, I hate him, I hate him." And I remember just that feeling, because it's so different than even what I felt a few days later. It was a very odd reaction for me, because now I know I honestly felt a lot of peace in that situation. But at the time, I was so angry because it took me 10 years to be able to tell this secret, right? It felt like it took so much courage for me to do that, only for that to just end so abruptly. I felt like something else was taken from me. I wanted him to face justice. I felt like I was never going to have that. 1 week after I told my stepfather took his life, I felt a little responsible for his death. I wondered if I shouldn't have told. But as my life has gone on and as my healing journey has begun and continued and will continue, I realize now that I did the right thing in telling. Finding my voice and using my voice is one of the most powerful things I could have ever done. And it's also what sparked my healing journey, because I believe that telling your secret, sharing your story, is the first step to healing. And healing's a lifelong journey, but we have to take that first step. And so now I look back and I'm really proud of that 14-year-old me who told, even though it was going to be really hard. The psychological effects and just the long-term effects of trauma are huge. I work with survivors every day now, and I see the effects just continuing it's like this little thread that just continues to weave in and out of relationships, just everything in your life. It takes a lot of work. Honestly, it takes a lot of work. Things can come up. I've been on this journey for many years, and I talk about it openly now, but triggers are real. There can be something that will come up in my day-to-day life that reminds me of a place I was when I was abused, that may even smell like my abuser, something as crazy as that. And it can bring you right back. And these are times where, your nervous system gets dysregulated. I can feel like I can't eat. I'm nervous. I'm hyper vigilant. I don't trust people, especially as a parent. It can really show up. My child is the age when some of my worst abuse happened. Something as simple as that's nothing about me, right? But it's about someone I care about. I often say we don't choose our coping chose us based on what was available at the time. I may have coped in this certain way back then that made it so I made it to today. But I'm saying thank you. Thank you to that coping mechanism, because it was there when I needed it, when no one else was, and it got me to today. Just like every survivor's story is different, the abuse story is different. Truly, our healing journeys are all different too. And we're all healing from different things, but survivors speak the same language. I think that's why we're so often comfortable in the same room. It's because we feel understood in a way that maybe other people wouldn't understand us. It's like we can complete each other's sentences. So though our stories look different and sound different, there's something that's very similar. For me, my coping may not have looked like another survivor who struggled with an eating disorder, right? But mine looked more like perfectionism, people pleasing, things that actually were applauded, in my school, when I went to college, when I started a career, all of these things. But truly, they were harmful to me because it was a mask that I was wearing. I couldn't be authentic. I couldn't show up as my real self because I felt like I always had to perform. And that was straight out of my trauma. And so I carried that way into adulthood. And that, was definitely one of the coping that I had to deal with, because eventually it can turn, it can turn to things like codependency. And I really started to struggle in my early adulthood with codependency. I felt like, all the wounded ones were coming to me and I wanted to fix them all, right? But it was killing me. It was dragging me down. It was ruining my life. And I felt I couldn't get out of it because I couldn't say no. Sometimes I think we look at unhealthy coping mechanisms as these things that are just so obvious. The teenager who's cutting herself and just feels so worthless and alone, or the addict who ends up homeless. And we look at all of these people and we think that's horrible. They're messed up. That's a lot of mental illness, but yet you don't look underneath it to the story. And I wish more people would do that, look beneath the surface in the lives around us. But it's the same way with the high achievers, the high functioning survivors, right? We're over here overachieving, getting all the awards and accolades and the promotions. Meanwhile, we are dying inside. I wish someone had checked on me earlier. I think a lot of victims of especially child sexual abuse, we hint. We send little hints to people and we're just waiting for someone to catch the hint and look beneath the surface, ask questions, get more information. In my childhood, no one was picking up on these little breadcrumbs that I was dropping. I remember specifically in 5th grade, there was a lady from the sheriff's department that came to our school and showed us this cartoon about child sexual abuse. This is the first time I'd ever heard anyone talk about it. And so I'm sitting there on the little library floor with my 5th grade friends just watching this video and thinking to myself, wow, that really seems a lot like what's happening to me. They're saying it's a big deal and you should tell. After the video, we lined up to go back up to our classroom. I ditched to the front of the line where my teacher was standing and I said, I really want to tell you something, but I don't want to tell you right now. I'm going to write in my journal on Wednesday. So every Wednesday we had just free writing time. And so I thought to myself, this is that big of a deal. She'll know what I'm talking about. So journal time came around. I thought I could really write about this, but I am so scared to write it down. I wrote a poem. It was something stupid I'll never forget. It was about a bear named Mr. Stutter who liked peanut butter. That's not what I wanted to tell her in the library a few days ago, right? I write this poem and I just wait and I think she's going to come and ask me, do I want to talk? But my teacher never came to me. And then the next 3 years were the most abusive years, the worst years. Right away, when I think of what really helped me on my healing journey, there's been so many things along the years, but the first thing obviously was my mom believing me and supporting me. I was journaling at the time, and I will say that has been something that has been helpful all through my healing journey. To be able to journal, to write it out, to get your feelings on paper. It just helps you kind of when everything feels jumbled inside, it's almost like you put it out on paper and it kind of finds its place and it can settle things down. At my stepfather's funeral, my mom and I went. My mom shouldered all the blame because I didn't want anyone to know about the abuse. She told everyone at the funeral he took his life because she was going to leave him. So no one really knew in the community about why. But my music teacher showed up to the funeral. And it wasn't in a nosy, gossipy way like some people did. I knew it was genuine. I felt that. And it stuck with me for a few months. I went to school. It was my 9th grade year, first year of freshman. She was my middle school music teacher, but she was also then my high school one as well. She did all the grades. And I remember just thinking, I really want to tell her the truth about why he took his life. So I met her at school one day. I said, Mrs. Bell, I really want to tell you the truth about why my stepfather took his life. And I wondered if I could just talk to you. And she said, absolutely. Can you meet me after school? And I said, yes, of course. And so as I'm telling her the truth of why my stepfather ended up committing suicide, she looked at me and she dispelled each one. She's like, Nicole, I believe you. It wasn't your fault. You didn't deserve that. She said, I don't look at you any differently. In fact, I care about you even more now and I want to be there for you. And she said, whenever you want to talk, I'm here. And I was like, wow. If everybody could respond to a survivor of sexual violence in that way, our world would be a whole different place. And so that, I think, was really important to me at the beginning of my healing journey. To hear those things from a real life person and to see her walk it out, I did feel like she cared about me more. She checked on me. There were times that she would allow me to read my journal to her or show her journal entries. Even honestly, there were times when I thought, well, if Mrs. Bell knows this story, this part, this is probably where she'll change her mind. This is the one thing where she'll say, Nicole, you actually probably did ask for that one, So I'm sitting there thinking that to myself. We've gotten this far. Maybe I'll try it. So I remember sharing with her one of my memories that I had written out in my journal one time. It was one of the ones that I felt like for sure I probably somehow asked for this one. Maybe I liked the attention this time. Hearing her say to me without a doubt, Nicole, you were a child. You never asked for that. You didn't deserve it. I don't care what you thought. I don't care what you wore. I don't care why you went to that place with him. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It wasn't your fault. And it just kept taking this heavy blanket off of me time and time again. And I'll just go so far as to say where my shame really was lifted the most was when I realized my body didn't betray me. But then there was those little things I felt like I couldn't tell anybody, like, and my body responded to my stepfather's touch, and I feel like the most disgusting person in the world. The moment I was able to understand it wasn't my body that betrayed me, it was my stepfather that did. That was when the shame shattered in my life. I tell my story publicly, really for the hope of others coming forward and sharing theirs. I've been speaking for over 20 years, but it all started out actually when I was 15 years old. I was invited to this summer camp. The last day of the camp, they had this time of open mic where people could just come up and share something cool that happened that week. I remember just walking up to that microphone and almost feeling like my legs were walking for me. I felt really compelled to tell my story. And this was really the first time, like I said, my best friend didn't even know yet. And I got up and I told just in a nutshell about my abuse, and that I don't even know what the point of it was, whether it was to free me or to tell an inspiring story. I don't know, but I did it. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, like, what have I done? And about 3 days after I got home, I started getting letters in my mailbox. Thank you, Nicole, for your courage. I too have been sexually abused and never told anybody. And it was just letters and letters and letters. And I couldn't believe the number of other kids at that camp. I thought I was the only one. And here I was seeing that there were so many other kids like me, kids that would go to a camp. I was just realizing for the first time that I wasn't alone. To those who maybe haven't experienced abuse, but know someone who has, and surely you do know someone that has, I want to just say to you, You don't have to have all the answers to enter into someone else's pain. People in pain just need to be heard and loved, and we can all do that. To those who've experienced sexual abuse like I have, I just want to remind you that you're not alone. There's so many of us out there. I think being able to find that safe place to talk about your experiences is really important. Don't allow yourself to shut down. Don't allow yourself to stop your own healing process, because healing is so worth it. It's so worth it, and you're worth it.